Hi, everybody. Just wanted to catch up on week two, review a couple things, and first of all, thanks to Adam for doing a very nice job with motivating conversation and looking objectively at the evaluation criteria, things like that. Nice job, Adam. And I'll look forward to seeing your final notes on what you learned through that process. A couple things interesting in the discussion this last week, and one of them I thought was Wendell's comparisons to teaching speech and teaching music. And there's some obvious ones, obviously. The importance of rehearsal and practice and things like that. Both public speaking and music at some level are skill and at some other level are art. And certainly at the skill level we have a lot we can do to help people understand the principles needed to practice the application of those principles to get better at doing it. I wonder about what you're thinking about skill as all aspects of communication as skill. I mean, we think of public speaking as a skill we can develop. Is mediating conflict another example of a skill you could develop? Is this really? Are we really? Is this a skill-based discipline, or are there broader theoretical principles that give us texture and nuance and go beyond just the teaching of a particular skill? I think that's an interesting question for you as we go on. I also appreciate Ranesh's observations about, he said that he'd like to teach an intercultural class, communication class, and some of that came out of his own personal experience. I think that people, the discipline is broad enough and interdisciplinary enough that while you may teach some aspects that you're not as comfortable with or not as engaged with, there's certainly room for you to find niches that do come out of your own experience. In my case, I teach a lot of writing and journalism, and it comes out of my experience as a writer and a journalist. And I enjoyed teaching those classes. Do I teach other classes? Well, obviously I'm teaching this one, but there are things that are in our past that have helped us go perhaps to a different level or a more satisfying level of sharing what we know and what we do. So as you look at communication as a place to be teaching, remember there's always extracurricular things, there's lots of different aspects to the discipline, and you can find places where your particular experiences seem to fit and improve that. You know, one thing that didn't come up in our discussion, but there was an article in our reading, and that was on peer evaluation. How do you use peer evaluation in the classroom? And I mentioned that because communication is so complex, and evaluating it sometimes benefits from multiple perspectives. In fact, it helps students when they're trying to communicate to realize that the audience is larger, that some people will understand, some won't. How can they make it so more people understand, and everything like that. And because of this, peer evaluation is a thing that we can use, but it's also important from just the standpoint of managing the workload, because the discipline is so complex, because there are so many things to consider. To sit down one night and rewatch 20 student videos of a speech they gave, for example, is something that we might not need to do. We may watch and respond to the speech in class ourselves using a rubric. We may develop a rubric for peers to use. We can find lots of different ways for people to provide some engagement. I speak as one who, right now I'm teaching a class where you're going to moderate each week, and that's not just to manage the workload, but for you to develop the skill. But in doing it, you're learning important things, and so I'm talking about in the doing of the evaluating. And so putting students in a position where they evaluate things, or they make comments on things, or where they talk about what worked and didn't work, can be helpful for them as a communicator. It can also be helpful for the peer. So in the issue of peer evaluation, never assume that the students know how to do that. So it may take some training. You may have to show them what to look for. You may have to teach them what aspects are important. That, for example, might be the reason why you'd create a rubric for students to evaluate a speech or someone else's paper or something like that. Make sure that they are thinking about the right things, and that they're taught to do that graciously. And honestly, and sometimes those two things are hard to get together, both being gracious and being honest. And so conversations with students about that before you ask them to evaluate other people's works, and quite frankly, conversations with them after they've done it and perhaps haven't done it that well, maybe haven't been as gracious as they needed to be, whatever. Those are important teaching moments, I believe, in this discipline. One of the things I like to do in these weekly wrap-ups is speak to the questions, the discussion questions that were provided by your moderator the previous week. And I don't want to do it during the week because I don't want to sort of get in the way or suggest that there's a right answer or something. That I'd rather you discuss, or rather the moderator feel like that they had the freedom to ask the questions or make the observations about what you say. But the moderator did ask a question, and so I'm going to just take a moment to answer the questions. And one of those questions had to do with what you might like to teach, and how do you plan it, evaluate it, deliver it. And I'd say that my favorite thing to teach is a writing course. And when I think about that comes out of my experience as a writer. I was a reporter for a while. I've been a magazine editor. I've had those kinds of experiences. But I did those things because I love doing them, and so I also love teaching them, and I love seeing students succeed at them. And when I'm thinking about a writing course, in fact, I'm working on the writing course right now that some of you may take in just a few weeks. But one thing I'm interested in at the planning stage is, how do I create situations that feel real, or topics that seem important. I need students to take ownership of an idea and care about it enough to go do a little digging, a little thinking, a little gathering information, asking better questions in their interviews and things like that. Part of that is setting it up so the topics themselves or the assignments themselves seem like they're real, seem like they matter, seem like somebody's going to read them. So that might mean we publish a class blog. It might mean that we submit stuff to other publications. There's a lot of different ways in which you can make it feel like it's real and it matters. But when I'm planning a writing course, that's one of the things that I think about. As far as delivery, I think it's important, again, and I'm speaking of a writing course, I think it's important to provide good models. So can I point you to a Pulitzer Prize winning feature story and talk about what a feature story looks like, and what's in that story that you might want to try to do yourself at some level. And so in delivery, it's, for me, often the issue of making sure I can find the right models for students of the kind of writing I want them to do, and the kind of power that writing can have. And that would be my response to the delivery aspect of that question. And as far as the evaluation, I think in evaluating people's writing, it's important to ask questions about what's not clear. So while at some point you put a number on it and everything else to be the most important part of the evaluation, is to be thinking about how do I ask a question that helps them understand that this part isn't clear, or how do I suggest to them how that could have been clearer, perhaps by suggesting another source or another way of thinking about it, or another person to ask, or another other research to consult in terms of whatever it is they're writing. So I think the evaluation has to not just be, here's an observation about what you said, but here's a question about what you said, and can I use that question to stimulate their thinking about how to go deeper, or how to be clearer, or whatever. So that's my answer to the question about what course you'd like to teach, and how might you go about planning it, evaluating it, delivering it. And then Adam had posed a question about, how do you defend communication as a discipline? And of course, Chris has his list of 10 things, and those professional things several of you pointed to, and certainly they're important. If I was in a situation where the university was thinking about closing the comm department, certainly part of what I would be talking about is not just the importance of public speaking, and of course Adam suggested that the university isn't thinking of getting rid of public speaking courses, just communication as a department. I would push back on the idea that things like leading teams, managing conflicts, sort of some of the more interpersonal stuff, these continue to be the soft skills that employers are interested in. Administrators, quite frankly, are interested in what's marketable, and I think there can always be a case made for it because it's so clear. You look at almost any discussion of what employers are looking for, there will be some mention of communication, and particularly the soft skills involved. So that would be sort of my line of defense. And if you can be clear about the potential to market the thing or to attract students or whatever, then obviously administrators are going to be interested in maintaining that. So anyway, my responses to Adam's good questions, and again, my appreciation for his moderating the discussion this week, and to Ranesh for his work this week. You're off to a good start, and looking forward to see how the week progresses. And finally, just a couple of key points: the importance of connecting your own experience and, quite frankly, your own passion, and the notion of communication as a skill, and whether or not it's more than that. And if it is, what is it that's more than that? We have the rest of the term to think about that. So, thanks.